Testing 1, 2. Well, that's not good. Checking the sound. Alrighty, we're ready, already. Testing the sound again. Alrighty, here we go. Welcome to Nycos Nightly News, your information fix on all things Nycos in terms of the campaigns that are being run right now. This does include the games on on Saturdays, Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, and oh boy, we got a lot to talk about today. So sit back, relax, and get your map ready. I'm going to check to make sure the map room is up to speed. Yep, we are ready to go there. So, alrighty. So we are going to be talking about 4 campaigns tonight, as we usually do, and just a slight bit on the roleplay roulette situation. Now, pardon me, I'm so professional. Notice I don't have a cough button set up yet. Alrighty, so get to my notes pages, so I've got everything ready to go. So we are going to start with, as usual, our Sunday group that begins the week, and that group are the Heralds of the Change, and they are currently in the beautiful city of Florin, and have done a considerable amount of shopping. They are stalling out for a couple of days as they are waiting for the King of Florin, the Lord Marshal himself, to return to the city so that they can have a confab with him in order to complete a commitment that was made between them some time ago. With the awareness of the extra free time, they did spend some time doing some local bargain shopping and such in the city, and discovered that there were several points in the community wherein there were potential jobs to be had, and so they went investigating those particular want ads, and those want ads are now listed in, where did we put them? I believe we put them in the Raven Gnome, yep, we put them in the Raven Gnome News Network, so that those of you from other adventuring groups can look at the help wanted lists that are available. And that is on our Discord account. If you are an interested fan and would like to be a part of our community, all it requires is a membership in our Patreon account. And if you purchase the $20 per month, if you support us at $20 a month, then you're provided access to all of our game sessions during a month. That comes out to better than a 50% savings for the online games that we run. So that is the Saturday and Sunday sessions. You're provided the opportunity to join us in those games. And so they took a gander at this help wanted list, the basically off the shelf possible pursuits they could get involved with within the city, and started to do some investigation. That process led them to the Whispering Wood. Now, in the Whispering Wood, there really were voices. The Whispering Wood centered on an ancient grove of trees, which still maintain an emblem on the ground that had been formed decades ago, maybe even centuries ago. And one of the players, with due diligence, decided to tidy the place up and clear the debris that had been left upon the marks on the ground, and this was rewarded with a further display of the very beings in the Whispering Wood who were petitioning. And it seems that the Whispering Wood emblem was that of the newly developing faith of the goddess Miri, and this investigation led to what appeared to be the unanswered prayers of this goddess Miri were swirling about, and as they did, the very person who had been clearing the area happened to be a persona of Kantu, who is a Aruk, and very unlikely for an Aruk to be so generally positively inclined towards apparently a green temple type of arrangement and emblem. And as that spirit cleared, the player showed deference to this burgeoning faith without realizing what he was doing. But the persona was doing this cleaning ritual without necessarily thinking of it, but the player who was responsible for that character also happened to in the past have been a persona in a previous incarnation who was a high priest of this order. And so perhaps it was his personal conscience that was causing him to do this cleansing ritual despite his lack of knowledge on the subject. But we determined that it should be rolled as a potential that it would unlock inside of this new character, the old persona, sort of like I guess you would call it what's what I'm looking for? Injunction possession. And the player was very amenable to this. He liked the idea that he was going to get a moment or two in the sun for this unrequited character of his, and I told him it had to be a double down success, and he succeeded. And therefore, he manifested this alternate personality in the form of the character he was playing, which was quite humorous for those who were here and watching, because they were a part of that very culture and were excited for the scene. And as it played out, the scene went exactly as anticipated, and the die rolls all seemed to support the final conclusion that he had basically unstoppered those prayers that were intended for Miri that had been unrequited, and thereby released the spirits of those uncompleted prayers. Well, after that, they decided to continue their local investigation, finding eventually something that was known as the well of, what is it called? Well of Whispers. And lo and behold, there is a spirit that lives there of a ancient water spirit trapped for these many years at this location, who was himself under an enchantment and a curse, and therefore could not reveal to the players what was burdening him. And so they engaged with that spirit and had a pretty deep conversation with this elemental being of the plane of water. And as they talked, they found that the imprisonment of this particular creature was a corruption of the ancient order of Miri that was forming in the first days, as there was no advent of a priesthood to support her claims for godhood. This elemental spirit known as a Marid was enchanted and entranced and imprisoned in this artesian well at the temple site of the goddess. And this Marid, therefore, was essentially entrapping those spirits of the prayers and draining them of their power and converting it for transition to the being who was this Marid's captor. And as the story unfolded, that captor was found to be Davros. The name Davros is ancient and is always associated with baleful and dangerous things, and this discomfited the group, and they determined that they were going to try to find a way to free this Al-Akshabat Marid, and we haven't quite resolved that yet, but that was the gist of the encounter, is that they are engaging with this water being and trying to figure out whether to leave him where he is or find a way to release him. So they do have their meeting coming up with the Lord Marshal of Florin, and so we will follow through on that with our next session. All right. From there, we're going to move on to our second campaign, and let me go ahead and I don't know if that music is being too much of a burden, but I'll make it go away altogether. So now we're going to move on to our second campaign, and the second campaign would be the Sunday group. I'm sorry, that was Sunday group, so Monday group. So therefore that would be Strangers in a Strange Land. And as that story unfolded, we were in the ruins of the Eldrin city, Jazerse, up in the mountains. And we had only been into the first few receiving chambers of the palace, and the party's minstrel, Miriam Brandywine, decided to go further into the ruins, hoping to find some remnant of the millennia of decades of musical history and such, that the Eldrin population of the city, those Primus, would have been responsible for creating and maintaining. And with high hopes, she entered the area of the libraries, only to find that the devastation was extensive, that there had been what appeared to be several different physical attacks made upon this structure, and the collapse and decay of the majority of the pillars that had maintained the Eldrin musical patterns that would have been the histories was extensive, and she literally wept over that destruction. Or while she was doing that, the rest of the adventurers had gone further south into the flaming ruins, looking to complete their objective of gathering bits and pieces of the wreckage for the construction of a suit of mechanized armor for Bowden, their primary, I guess you would call him, tank, for lack of a better word. He spent most of his time developing his martial skills, and so they were looking at utilizing his developing engineering mechanistic skills and his growing development of understanding of technomancy to actually build this suit of basically self-sustaining armor. And as they were concluding that search, Bowden himself uncovered a survivor, a single survivor from the devastation of the city. It appears to be a young female Eldrin, young Primus, who at their discovery they found to be somewhat shell-shocked and did not seem able to speak. And so they endeavored to save her and also retrieve what it appeared to be her mother. Now the child's name was discovered to be Erica Kincaid, and that was on a locket which was found not around the young girl's neck, but that of the apparently gruesomely decapitated form of what must have been her possible maternal unit. And as they recovered that body to give it due justice, they also discovered in amongst the ruins close by the not only the gruesome remains, but they also found a apparently recently functional head of some other kind of insect-like being that apparently was still in some kind of autonomic function capability, and they disabled it. And that disabling was very fortunate, but it also allowed them to recover what might have been the maternal remains and bring back that along with all their other cargo to Elsadar. And their efforts were rewarded with the completion of the checklist of all the items necessary to construct this suit of mechanized armor. So we will be pursuing that development this next week. And of course, they, on the other hand, have, I guess you would say, are fundamentally eyewitnesses to the departure of the Lord Marshal of Florin back to his home after the announcement of the Imperator Darkenval and his developing pogrom into the southern lands in the name of the combined might of the Middle Kingdoms with the priest-kingly orders of the Vales. So we will see how that goes starting next week. Alrighty, third campaign we're going to talk about would be the Skiffborn. And the Skiffborn have been engaging with the protectors and benefactors in charge of the tangerine cigarette, a species known as the Mord, and the imprisoned one there, whom is calling himself Baphomet, Eater of Tongues, who says that he is wrongly imprisoned here. And though his essence is constantly being gleaned from, the very ziggurat itself seems to be drawing additional power from this virtually eternal being. Nonetheless, it has now been locked away from the players as they created a untenable relationship between themselves and the Mord, as the lists their captors had come to call. So the adventurers took their airship, having it arrive last week, and have now sailed back to Nexus. They made several obscuration checks to make sure they were able to re-enter the city in peace and without interference by the local government concerning their recent thievery. As you may recall, last week we talked about the fact that they had, in effect, stolen a local fishing sloop and sailed out to the ziggurat for their adventure, and then subsequently sold the vessel to a disinterested party that left them stranded. So as their airship returned and they now sailed back to the Nexus, they have determined that they would needed to stay for several rituals as party members are committing to ordinances of the Veils under the Priest King guidance. And in particular, the Leporine Frederick has fully endorsed and embraced the Yellow Veil, and now has taken the orders, if you will, to become a Yellow Veil advocate and priest, and having done so is now dedicated to the order in a more strong fashion, as they have blessed him with the convocation that makes him a official priest of the order, and as a gift provided him with a mystical ring that manifested on his hand after the ritual, and provides inordinate joy and somewhat almost Orange Veil levels of reward for any activity of great caprice and indiscretion. And with that, they have also started to, trying to remember the exact way it played out, but they decided to consider the sacking of the temple of the Rainbow Veil, and as there were no priest kings present any longer to prevent it, and with his resource access as a priest, they went ahead and now have stolen what appear to be the command wands of each of the 10 orders. So this will cause some interesting ramifications in what happens hereafter. It's not going to be pretty, but it's pretty exciting. So this also led them to observe and interact with a spirit. They were looking into the so-called crossroads incursions, and as they observed a being, beautiful, apparently well-dressed, hoop-skirted, what appeared to be a southern belle with a parasol, had stepped out of a carriage, granted a horse's carriage, in the darkness of night, and though she was quite apparently ghostly and shimmering, they nonetheless decided to interact with her. And so the entirety of the adventurers, with the exception, if I recall, of Albion, I believe Albion with once again held his water, so to speak, and decided not to participate, but the rest of them were fundamentally interacting with this spiritual woman, who drew their attention to the glare of the night's moon, at which point, of course, several of the players, not comprehending, had to actually roll dice to determine whether or not they were aware of the fact that there is no moon in the world of Nycos at present time. And one of them, unfortunately, fell prey to her wiles and did indeed see the moon, at which time she offered him a blessing and said that he, among all of them, would survive the coming apocalypse. So, whee, spooky. So, the other thing that has happened is that each party has now been provided with a copy of the purpose, so that the newer players who may not be aware of it can take a look at the wording and the message of the presence of the purpose, so they can determine what their particular adventuring group may or may not have accomplished, for the idea of ensuring that all the points of it will eventually be completed. So that brings us to our arguably most interesting adventure of the week, and I only say that because it's breaking convention, and that is the Voyage of the Arkan Eye. After traveling almost 18 days south and weathering a rather devastating storm, they have finally found a legitimate landmass, and as they approached it, the scale of it was staggering for them, in that they haven't seen a landmass as big as this since they left their port in Selk 18 days ago. And so they are overjoyed to have found it within a month, and therefore have sought to position the Arkan Eye where it is not visible from the shore, nor is it visible from possible raiders. And so as they're preparing the boat for their departure into the interior of this land, they had crossed or passed by a village and ascertained that they had not actually engaged with those particular beings. The locals did not see them, if you will. And so, there we go. Just wanted to make that opportunity available. So they have therefore landed the vessel, and as they did so, they noticed that there were a couple of water creatures nearby, and as they observed them, they were struck with the size of these beings. They appear to be some form of giant tree sloth with a significant genetic difference, in that they have a carapace almost like a shell. So they're shell-backed, if you will. And these shell-backed beings are approaching the vessel with a considerable amount of curiosity, and they were concerned with that and did not want to have these dangerous creatures with their very sharp climbing claws. They were concerned that they might be coming to consume the vessel or otherwise damage it, and so they've already engaged with the creature, firing several arrows at it and damaging the initial one and literally driving it out of its tree, and causing the second one that is passing through the waters, seemingly walking on the bottom and approaching the vessel from the side. They've begun to fire at them, and so we will next week have the Battle of the Salamor, which are the names of the beings that they are engaged with, so we'll have more details on that. So now that is the list of the adventures this week. Now we do have role play roulette on Saturdays, and this last week we didn't have any players. So if you are a role player, or even if you are not, but you are interested in learning about role play and you're in the Southern California area, the store we operate with is, as my logo down here suggests, we are involved with Board Game Paradise. It's on State Street in Redlands, California. And we are there Mondays and Tuesdays for our usual campaigns at 6 p.m. and for Roleplay Roulette at 2 p.m. on Saturdays. So if you want to be part of the games, that's one way to do it. You also can join our Patreon at group and our family at at NycosRPG. NycosRPG. No, I'm saying that all wrong. Blah. I got my tongue got in front of my teeth and I couldn't see what I was saying. Patreon.com/Nycos, and if you participate with that at the $20 value or higher, you gain access to the Saturday and Sunday games at no additional fee, and you can play around along with us on Discord. It also will provide you with the Discord access, and there's many other benefits as well. So having said all of that, I have come to the end of this episode, and I'm sure the commercials are probably running right about now. So unfortunately that's a thing. And I am Jonathan Albin, and this is Nycos RPG. This has been the Gnome News Network, Nycos Nightly News, and we will see you in our next episode. Remember, we are on air Monday through Friday, 10 o'clock a.m. and 11 p.m. Pacific Time, Monday through Friday, and so we will see you tomorrow on Friends Day. Talk to you later.